Pocket Micro is AYANEO's first attempt at entering the affordable Android handheld market, primarily focusing on creating a device that can emulate an array of retro consoles while keeping a slick, modern and minimal design built with high quality materials. It's a device that will certainly scare other handheld manufacturers in the space, and it's a look at what AYANEO can do on a tighter budget. After interviewing Arthur Zhang, the CEO of AYANEO, on our website, I was intrigued to see how they get on with building a $219 device of this caliber. It has a metal shell, whole joysticks, a stunning display covered with a glass front that wraps around the buttons, and a custom built front end to organize your games. Now that it's in my hands and I've had plenty of time to test this device, I want to share my initial thoughts, what I love about it, what I dislike about it, and if it's worth the price tag in a market that is certainly oversaturated. I do want to mention that AYANEO did send this to me as a sample, and it is their pre-production sample, the ones that won't be going out into the public, and they did mention that it comes with a couple of issues, or potentially some issues. One was light bleed, the other was the fact that it may have some software bugs, the TF card slot is a little bit dodgy, and they mentioned that the buttons might not be perfect. So I do want to mention that in the review, which I will get to, and the device that I am reviewing is their 8GB version, which is their higher end $250 device. Let's talk about specs. This has a 3.5-inch borderless IPS display with a resolution of 960 by 640 with 330 ppi. It packs a MediaTek Helio G99 CPU, 6 to 8 gigabytes of RAM, a 2600 mAh battery, Android 13, whole joysticks, vibration motor and gyroscopes, and it comes in at around about 233 grams in terms of weight. There's no denying that AYANEO has put a lot of time and effort into creating a beautiful handheld. The AYANEO Pocket Micro could be their most beautiful handheld yet. Size-wise, it's certainly not small, but it's not big, but definitely not micro. It's the same size as a typical smartphone and weighs the same as one too. It has the same thickness as a deck of cards, so although it is pocketable, yes, its length makes it only fit larger pockets comfortably. So I am on the fence whether it comes into, is this technically small or is this just normal sized handheld? I would probably actually go towards, it's pretty much a normal sized handheld emulator in my opinion. As you can tell, it's certainly a sharp handheld with squared corners, a flat design and minimal shoulder buttons that hide somewhat in the shell. It's comfortable, but it's designed not for ergonomics but for style. This is not a device that you spend 4 or 5 hours on at a go. I found myself just putting 1 or 2 hours in now and then, and there's a reason for that. There's two reasons actually. Firstly, because this only has 2600 milliamps of battery, meaning I was only really getting 4 to 5 hours out of it on a single charge, and that all depends on what you're playing. If it's smaller NES, Game Boy games, you'll get like 6 hours, but if you're pushing towards the Dreamcast and GameCube emulation, you're looking closer to 3-4 in all honesty. Secondly, it's designed for older consoles within the 32-bit era, and those are typically games that you don't play for hours on end in one session. The sharp edges do add some strain when compared to rounded edges, but you won't feel the strain unless you're trying to drain the battery in one go. The AYANEO Pocket Micro has purposely been designed to look like this, to follow AYANEO's minimal modern goals. They don't want to make a handheld that looks like something else on the market. They want to be innovative and create a handheld that almost feels like a piece of art. AYANEO have wrapped this device in a CNC aluminium alloy metal, which makes this device feel incredible in the hands and adds to the premium nature of this device. The CNC machine used must have been incredibly accurate because I can't find one single scratch or a slightly misaligned cut on here. The shell is quite literally flawless. To add to the premium feel of the handheld, AYANEO continues to add a solid block of glass to the front of the handheld, which wraps around the buttons to create a visually pleasing device that is becoming a signature in many of AYANEO's designs. AYANEO stated in their disclaimer email that the buttons may not be good quality on my device, but I have yet to find any flaw with them individually. The D-pad is great and has good diagonal movement, but you do really have to dip your thumbs and fingers over the analog sticks to stop your thumb from touching them. There were times where I did touch the left stick accidentally because they are located so close to the D-pad or action buttons. This happened frequently when playing fast-paced games like fighting games and shooting games, for example. The analog sticks themselves use Hall sensing technology and sit high after the shell to give them increased movement. However, the height sacrifices portability and, as mentioned, does get in the way. I would have liked to see the analog sticks sit slightly deeper inside the shell. One, because I won't hit my thumb on them, and secondly, when I am transporting this device in a bag or in my pockets, the analog sticks do like to snag on things, which causes or can cause a higher chance of breaking them or damaging them. The Start, Select, AYANEO and Android buttons are located on the edge of the chin, raised enough so that they don't get pressed when standing the device up, and wrapped under enough so that they seem hidden in a way. It's a great location and keeps the face from looking cluttered. You'll find 2 speakers on the bottom alongside a USB-C port for charging. On the left-hand side, you have your micro SD card slot to insert your files and ROMs. And I did have an issue with this. Admittedly, AYANEO mentioned it to me in an email, but I review products, so I have to mention it. The flap on the micro SD card is just too tight, and it's too, the attachment to the metal shell is just too small. So I find myself, when I open it, just flapping around trying to get my SD card in. And when I do want to shut it, the silicone is just too big for the cutout, so you really have to squeeze it in there. And it just likes to pop out now and then, which is really quite annoying. So I think, or AYANEO said they're going to change this, but we'll have to see once the proper units get shipped. On the top of the AYANEO Pocket Micro, you will find your shoulder buttons. Now, on any other device, I would have disliked this layout. As some of you may know from many of my reviews, I'm a big fan of the stacked format. However, these are incredibly slim, feel sturdy, and accompany the minimal design. So I believe stacked buttons here would have completely changed the design and not made the handheld look minimal or modern overall. However, these are not analog shoulder buttons, which I think will start to become a common feature in handhelds within this price range in the future. Between the triggers, you'll find a volume button, a large ventilation grille, and a fingerprint reader that opens up and secures your Android OS. It's a nice feature, easy to set up, and adds to the premium line of features that this device offers. Then finally on the back, you'll find another large ventilation grille that allows the fan to push out hot air. When the fan is in use at max speeds, there is literally no ignoring it. It is loud, and to a point where if you were using the fan at max speed on a train or anywhere in public, you probably will get dodgy looks because it does sound like a small drone. This is one of the most beautiful handhelds on the market, there's no lying. I'd put it on the same level as the metal analog pocket that I unboxed a few weeks ago. It's just absolutely stunning. And yes, it does add to the premium price tag, but there's just no ignoring that AYANEO know how to design a handheld. It's beautiful. But where AYANEO succeeds in creating physical beauty, they lack in making fluid user experience. And that's not only in the AS space, that's also in terms of the setup process. This is an Android device. Anbernic and Go Retro, which are half the price of this device, have setup processes for you so the user can just open it up straight out of the box, get into Android, and they have a basically step-by-step process that you can use and download the actual emulators and pre-install them straight out of the box, which AYANEO does not do. In fact, when I opened up this device, it was still in Chinese. So I had to scatter my way through the Chinese Android OS to find languages in the settings and then change it. And even in AS space, there are still areas that are in Chinese. So there's still bugs here, and AYANEO, although they put a lot of focus into their AS space, let's build this for newcomers. Let's say this is someone's first Android handheld. Hold their hand through the whole process. Get the emulators in for them. Help them through AS space. And don't put Chinese as a default language. This could have just been my review unit, to be fair. But if that's what they're going to do with all of their Western orders, that's going to be really annoying straight out the box as well. Once your Android apps are downloaded, you then have to set up AS Space. AS Space is getting much better as the years go by, but still requires a lot of work. I believe they're making this incredibly fluid, but just as of right now, there's still some issues that make it a little bit clunky. Putting ROMs into the space is pretty easy, and it will eventually look like a Netflix home screen with recent games showing, your library of consoles, and tagged favorites, which is nice. However, because most of my ROMs do not have the box art, there was a slight issue. Typically with AYANEO devices and their other larger handhelds, you can go into their data management within the ROMs and download all of the ROM data from their database, which is really, really good because people like me who just download their ROMs from their cartridges and stuff, you don't have the box art. So you can just go into AYASpace and download it and it's there for you. However, I did find a bug, and I did mention this to AYANEO, and they weren't quite sure if it was a bug or they're just lacking data. When I go into any of my games and download the data from AYASpace, it downloads all of the data, some background images, but never the box art. So I currently have a library with no box art. Their argument, and respectfully, they said just go and download the box art myself, but I have hundreds of ROMs. For me to do this manually on my computer and then install it onto my SD card and then go into data management and do all that again is a bit of a faff. And I was hoping AYASpace would be able to solve this. So I did want to be transparent here and explain why there's no box art on all of my shots, but that's because you just can't download it within AYASpace. But I do believe they will fix this, and hopefully in time for you customers when you get your orders, whenever that is, towards the end of the year. Now let's talk about emulation, because this is what the device does best and what it's designed to do. The 3.5-inch display partnered with the powerful MediaTek Helio G99 CPU is a very odd relationship because it's a really small screen but a really powerful CPU. A very powerful CPU with a very small screen. The CPU and the specs are lovely. You know, they can emulate GameCube games very, very well, and even a handful of PlayStation 2, but putting those games on a 3.5-inch screen, it's just overkill. It is just overkill. And in a sense, us as customers are paying for that power. But do we need all that power for what I think, where I think this handheld excels in terms of console emulation? On AYANEO's marketing material, the console they shout about the most is actually PlayStation 2. The exact words is powerful enough to handle PS2 games. Is that true? Technically, yes, like it can handle a few PlayStation 2 games, but the ones we all love and the best sellers and the most popular, not so much. Ratchet & Clank was the first one I went for, and that just does not run well at all, really. You know, it's just, this game requires a lot of power, and so does most of the PS2 library, and I just wasn't getting fluid frames per second here. And this is the issue. It's not really an issue because I am not going to be playing PS2 games on a 3.5-inch display. Nuh-uh. So if you're looking to play PS2 games on here, no, it doesn't do it, and it won't do it comfortably. You need like a 4 or even 5-inch screen for that, probably a 5-inch screen to play PS2 games comfortably. The same goes for GameCube games in a way too. It has a much higher hit rate in terms of playing games incredibly well. The only one that really struggled was Simpsons Hit and Run, and that was pretty much unplayable. But 90% of GameCube games do run well on here. But again, GameCube games on a 3.5-inch display, it's just like, it doesn't feel comfortable. And this is why I keep saying the chip or the specs are just overpowered for that. All I really do, like the biggest console I play on here, is probably N64 and Dreamcast. That's as far as I push. And even then, that is a little cramped on the 3.5-inch display. So I do believe I don't need this much power. Could have AYANEO reduced the power and reduced the price and made this far more affordable for a larger market and probably more reasonable? Yes. But I do guess AYANEO's answer to that is that they want to add a lot of power, so that this handheld lasts for a long period of time, and it can obviously emulate or play Android games, which do require power at times. N64, Dreamcast and PS1 games were an absolute pleasure to experience. Yes, you could argue that Dreamcast again has similar issues in terms of tech size, but it was less of a worry on here. These consoles played without any hiccups thanks to the CPU and are just about comfortable to play on a 3.5-inch display. But the most beautiful console to play on here is Game Boy Advance. Oh baby, mwah, mwah, mwah. Because the screen has that perfect resolution, it can actually do 4x Game Boy Advance resolution. This display makes them so vibrant and transforms them in a way that makes it feel like you're playing them like never before. Matched with premium build quality, it makes you feel like a kid again. Sega Mega Drive, NES, SNES, and original Game Boy games were also the go-to of mine, which is the exact moment when I realized it's just too much power for me. For those interested in Android gaming, then you won't be disappointed because every Android game I threw at this performed well. So although I do complain about the specs being overkill, for those interested in Android gaming, it's going to work a treat. But again, you're not going to be playing your fast-paced Call of Duty games on here. I was pretty much just playing Stardew Valley, which I know you don't need a lot of power for, but those are the types of games, the small, cozy games that do perform well on here and fit the size, the screen size, and the overall ergonomics. So Android games do work. I didn't even try cloud streaming on here, just no. Why would you do that? Yes, it can do it. It can absolutely do it, but why? Overall, this has quickly become one of my favorite retro handhelds of the year. The market is oversaturated with average to poor retro gaming devices, and AYANEO knows that. So they have created a premium handheld that feels better than most of the devices launched in the last 4 years, targeting a small niche who wants to experience 32 to 64-bit retro games in a premium manner and are happy to spend over $200 to get that. It's not a cheap device, but AYANEO understands that and uses premium materials in a way that feels nostalgic yet modern. It's one of those handhelds that when you get in your hands, you go, oh, this is going to be one that I'm going to be using for many, many years because of the build quality, of how stunning it looks, and it can do everything I want. It can do everything I want in a 3.5-inch manner. That said, it's certainly not perfect, and the specs used are overkill for what I need to play on this device. So I recommend taking a look at the 6GB version, which will allow you to save a few bucks if you're not a fan of emulating PlayStation 2 or most GameCube games. The AS space needs more work, the battery life will catch you out at times, and the analog sticks need to sit lower into the device. If you can live with those tiny flaws, then this is an incredibly built handheld that I have fallen in love with. I'm excited to see what else AYANEO do in the space because the market needs more handhelds like this. It needs aggressive innovation and I would say affordable pricing to kind of scare the guys getting away with mediocre quality. AYANEO has now entered the affordable retro handheld space and they've done that with a bang. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to hit subscribe. And if you want to support us on Patreon for extra goodies, and a behind the scenes look at our content, you can do that in the links below. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.